filter decision, like keep or discard. I don't know. We obviously can't put both up, but how do you think would be best to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I could share my screen. I'm kind of just I'm going over them now. I have been this morning to see like which ones are really jumping out. I'm not
Okay.
sure what we want to do for the flow of everything, but yeah.
I wonder if we just go through each one, and I'll be taking notes, and then I can either click keep or discard if we make a decision on each one, and then we could share that screen. So maybe to get a tally at the end of like where we are with, we can ask the members, to Representative Cloutier, if you and others have suggestions.
Sure.
Guys, I remember that I forgot who it was, the mediator, I always forget her name. She had mentioned that there was a weekend that we should probably be expecting to be sifting through a lot of stuff. That was this coming weekend, correct? Or do you guys remember them saying that, Kristen or Keith?
I don't remember.
Okay.
You're talking about Carol Kelly, who was the.
That's right, Carol. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember about that?
I think it might only be. I think today we're gonna like winnow down the 65 bills, just like the ones we think we want to keep and the ones we want to discard, and then I think the next layer is to like go through the ones we're keeping in more detail according to those. So that might be the work that she was referring to. But we can ask too, but I'm not totally sure, to be honest, how that, because I think we're supposed to meet once more before the full committee meets next Wednesday. So that doesn't give us much time between now and then to do that.
That makes sense. So we don't meet this Friday, or like as a whole committee?
I believe the commission is meeting still, or at least I have it on my calendar anyway. That's a good question though.
I thought that there was a subcommittee meeting between now and the weekend, but I'm not. The calendar wasn't exactly all that clear to me.
It's not just me.
Yeah, I guess I'm not. You're right, Bruce. I'm not seeing any meetings, at least on this calendar, that Rachel sent the link to.
Right.
Okay.
We could meet after this, rather than do it on Monday or Tuesday if we want to do that. I suppose.
Should we give it like 4 minutes and then
Sure.
just go with it?
Yeah.
So do you all have the ratings that everyone put into the system, like how all the ones that people had listed as 5s and all the ones that people had listed as 4s?
Not individually.
Okay, so did it put it all into like one? Okay, so that makes it a little bit easier, I guess.
Yeah, so Bruce, you want to share that now, actually? And
Sure.
hopefully you got that, Representative Cloutier, but maybe not. We have basically 65 slides that show like how each bill was rated. Yeah, there we go.
Can you see this?
I can, yeah.
Yep.
So I'll start up at the top.
Sorry, we can wait. I'm impatient.
No, it's good. Yeah. So I don't know if you got this, Kristen.
I
but
did not.
I'll forward this to you, Kristen. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
No worries.
We're all kind of
It's a fly by
figuring it
the
out
seat of your
here.
pants kind of thing. I totally get it.
Totally is.
Oh, rats.
Yeah.
So yes, she just sent it to you and me, Bruce. Okay, let me. And then Bruce, I'll send this to everyone else.
Battery might be. Okay, I just sent that. Representative Cloutier, you should have that momentarily.
Thank you.
So I guess one more minute, Bruce. I know a few people had to actually accepted the invitation, so I think we'll just
Maybe people just forgot. I don't know. Are you guys seeing just that particular page, or are you guys seeing my whole screen? Not that it matters. I'm just.
We're just seeing that. Sorry, go ahead, Representative.
I was just going to say, well, I think that as you scroll, we'll be able to see everything, but we're just seeing the survey right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see your like tab titles above, above your web browser, but that's it. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I have emails coming in. They're not particularly. There's nothing particularly sensitive, but just checking, just in case. All right. Well, I guess it's the three of us right now. And Kristen, I know you fairly well from the work that we've done, conversations that we've had, even as up to recently. But I don't know if Keith knows you, if you guys have had much collaboration. Do you guys know each other fairly well?
No, so this is my first, I think, our first interaction with each other, although I have done some work with CCI in the past.
Yeah. Okay. one thing Keith and I were just talking about was trying to, and like I said, given how small the group is, I'm not sure how vital it is, but one thing that Keith and I talked about yesterday is understanding the motives of people as, or their primary driving factors, I guess, when they're doing this work. So if we just want to go quickly and just discuss that before we get into the meat of this, that might be good. So I don't know, I guess I can put myself on the spot and just say, like I said, you guys both kind of know, I come at a lot of this work from a justice reform angle, due to my personal experience as somebody who's experienced it, as well as a lot of work that I've done with MPAC and with Maine Prisoner Reentry, and it's just something that's close to my heart, as well as the immigrant experience, because I work with so many individuals who are new Mainers, as well as my mother having come here from Mexico and not really ever having been able to work in the field that she studied while she was in Mexico. She studied to be a teacher at a university, which is how she met my dad. And she came up here and she was pretty much a caregiver and worked in retail because those credentials didn't transfer over. So a lot of the plight of what new Mainers are dealing with is really close to my heart. So I don't know if we want to, Kristen, do you want to kind of talk about your motivating factors around this?
Yeah, sure. So I served as the city council president and the mayor of Lewiston for about 6 years, and have worked at the Harvard Center for Community Partnerships at Bates College for double digits, a little over 20 years, which makes me feel really old. So have worked a lot with our immigrant and refugee communities, headed up the Immigrant Integration and Policy Development Working Group for the city of Lewiston. So our immigrant community has really just sort of been a real sort of focus of mine since I kind of got involved in community and in politics. One of my bills is one of the ones that we reviewed as part of this process. And just really sort of interested, I guess, in creating an equitable community and process and structure for those folks who I think are really valuable members of the Lewiston community and its revitalization, but also that of the state as a whole. So my focus up until now has really been on immigrant and refugee issues. But, recent events have really kind of made me take a good hard look at myself and my own role as kind of an ally and an advocate, and how I can expand upon that. And this process just kind of felt like a really good opportunity to kind of dive into some of that a little bit more.
Thank you, Sue. I guess I'll go, Bruce. My name is Keith Bisson, and I'm president of Coastal Enterprises Incorporated, CEI, based in Brunswick, and we are a community development financial institution that focuses on the integration of financing, business and industry expertise, and policy advocacy, and really, like both of you, really focused on trying to make the economy work for all people. And over the years, we've done a lot of work, for example, since 1997 with refugee business advising and lending to the refugees and immigrants. We have an office on Lisbon Street in Lewiston, just a cubicle basically, but where you may know John Scribner, who works out of that office a couple of days a week. But we've also done a lot of work with women-owned businesses and other underserved businesses across the state of Maine. So I'm kind of looking at it from that perspective as a financial institution, but also as an entity that provides business advising and some workforce development services to mainland businesses across the state. I am probably 3 generations out from first generation immigrants who came primarily to Lewiston, actually, Representative Cloutier. I'm probably the first person in my family who married out of the French Canadian community. So I married someone from Vermont. But so that history is sort of further out, but it's something that I often reflect on as I see some of the reactions that people in Maine have had to refugees and immigrants in our state. So I'm really excited about this work for, refugees and immigrants populations, obviously, but also other racial and tribal populations as well. So I look forward to digging in.
Great. I think that's some pretty good background. And I think it's important to, take that into account when we're just trying to get these angles. And I think I know I definitely have some blind spots in terms of, this is something I was saying to Keith. It's like, there's a lot of assumptions that I make when I go through this. And as I'm looking through some of the bills that you have a bunch of ones and then you have a bunch of fives, it makes me realize that that there's probably a lot of associations that we have with given populations that are either not shared or not true. And so I guess part of this process is going to be going through and figuring out where our blind spots are and see if there's anything that should be kind of brought up as potentially impacting communities of color in ways that we haven't thought of. So I guess with that, we can just kind of scroll down, and I don't know how we want to do this. Keith had agreed to kind of take notes, but given that there's only three of us, I think that we just kind of go into these things and try to make our cases, fairly quickly.
And Bruce, how about for each one, I'll check the box on keep or discard in that file, just so. And so yeah, as we make a decision, I'll just make sure we track that on the spreadsheet.
Excellent. So great. So I guess we'll just hop right into the work. So the first one, an act to authorize general fund bond issue to invest in infrastructure to address sea level rise. Actually, this is one, Kristen, that Keith and I had talked about, because at least in my thinking, we were like, well, I don't know how many immigrant communities and communities of color these days can afford to live by the water, because that tends to be fairly, in Maine, that tends to be fairly valuable property. That's not true nationwide or internationally, but that was kind of my thinking around that. Is that your thinking, Kristen?
Yeah, so it's unfortunate to me that some of the folks who are part of our subcommittee who have more I think skin in the game on some of these broader topics, like climate change issues, and then there were some around like hunting and those kinds of things that I personally have zero knowledge on. I mean, we know that climate change affects minority populations, but I don't. And honestly, in looking at all of these bills, I think all of them in some way could affect those populations. In terms of like the 1 through 5 ranking, I tended to put the things like this on the lower end of the spectrum. And it looks like, a majority of folks did. I think that probably the folks that ranked it in that average place probably, were thinking that climate change does affect BIPOC folks, but also in terms of looking at everything else, this kind of ranked lower than others.
Yeah, no, I think that was kind of our thinking. So obviously we're not going to go through everyone that in depth, but I think that background is really good to share.
Yeah, and I was totally sharing that as sort of like a precursor to the full conversation that we're having.
Well, and I think it's good context because I'll note that one as discard for now, and because this is an issue that I care deeply about, and at the same time, and there are arguments that climate change is disproportionately affecting these populations, but I think it's also a reminder to the legislators who maybe the sponsors and stuff that case needs to be made more deeply too, I think. So anyway, I'll not to belabor it, but I'll mark that one as discarded for now.
Great.
That's perfect. All right, so we'll go down through. So an act to reinstate income tax deduction for contributions into college savings accounts. That one got a lot of fours, it looks like. You know, I will admit that I have a blind spot there, because I know that a lot of the kids that I work with, say at Tree Street, did not have college saving accounts.
Yeah.
You know, but that's not universally true, I would assume, but in my experience, it's fairly true.
Yeah,
Bob?
so I'm on the taxation committee, so I can give you some background from that perspective if
Yeah,
we're interested. So the 529 plan actually is not kind of one of the most successful ways to help folks pay for college for all the reasons that you kind of just named, Bruce. That you know, there are folks who are familiar with those kinds of things, and there are folks who just aren't. And it tends to be low and middle income folks who aren't necessarily all those familiar with the 529 plans. And so it tends to not necessarily benefit, I think, the folks that we're looking at through this process, but more so middle income and upper income folks.
Yeah.
So I think the argument that it could help people save for college is a good one, but it's not necessarily the most successful way to do that.
okay.
So are we comfortable doing a discard on this one? And I agree with those arguments, and I think we'd need to do some work to make it.
So can we do a parking lot?
On this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me
Just
make
because,
one.
and I'm only saying that I don't think that I would be okay discarding it, but I do think that a large portion of the subcommittee had it as a 4. So if we could dial back, I think, to those things that we have questions about in that way, that might be good.
Okay, yeah, good idea. Good suggestion.
Right. And maybe we can put that in an email at least so that we can get some input from people who
Yeah.
want the meeting. So this is one that I don't fully understand, and I did reach out to Eloise Vitelli, and we just never were able to kind of close the loop on it. So an act to replace the earned income tax credit with a main work credit. I don't really understand what a main work credit is, honestly.
So the main again, I'm on taxation, and I'm actually a really big proponent of the EITC. The main work credit is just a renaming of the EITC that adds in some additional things. So I think that it ups the percentage or the amount that people can get back as part of their EITC. And again, the EITC is a program for low and middle income folks. And it also, I think, included students who are between the ages of 18 and 24, which was not part of the original EITC. And it also, I think, created an option for family caregivers to receive the credit. So this one, I think, has the potential to do a lot of good, but I don't, I think this might be a parking lot one.
Okay. What now? I also I did speak with my former partner Whitney, and she mentioned that this that there was another bill that might have been adopted essentially in place of this.
Yeah. So the I guess one of the problems I see with this whole process is that, and I'm sorry that I'm like taking up a lot of space here. I realize I'm doing that.
Kristen, you need to be. There's only 3 of us. We got a lot of space to take up.
So the problem I see with a lot with this process, and I guess with like our legislative process in general, is that there can be like 4 or 5 bills that address the same issue, either in the same way or in different ways. And we're supposed to get to a point where we've narrowed all of these bills down and we're presenting sort of one path forward, but for some reason this session that did not happen. And so I think that there are probably other subcommittees who have similar bills to this one on their tables who are considering it in the same way that we are, which is kind of in a silo on its own. And so it wasn't really clear to me as we went into this process, knowing that there was probably more than one bill that addressed the EITC, how our subcommittee was supposed to handle the review of the bill in front of us. So are we supposed to be saying, okay, I know that there's this other legislation on the table that another subcommittee might be reviewing. Am I reviewing this bill in comparison to that? Or am I looking at this bill solely on its own merits and how it will affect the population?
Good question.
I think we should probably consider both. I guess the other thing is, I mean, this is, I just would encourage us to like not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it too, because this is just, because people will have a chance to be like, oh, well, you didn't include this one. And they do have that option to, it's not perfect. I totally agree. And I don't have, it's easy for me to say that to Representative Clear because I'm not a legislator too. So
I guess, so I would want at least one EITC bill, I think, in the mix at the end of this process. I would agree with Whitney that the other one is the better choice.
Okay.
Well, let's leave this in the parking lot for the moment anyway, and then so we can get through all the others, but hopefully we can come back to it at the end of this call. Is that okay, Bruce?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's put a little note by it too, just with the questions that Kristen kind of raised there. And maybe we put that out either to Rachel or to the rest of the committee. Is that doable?
That sounds great. And in the meantime, I can probably I'll find out what the bill number is for the bill that Whitney's referencing.
Okay, because my understanding is that one might have already passed. Yeah.
Yes, something did pass, I think, during the first half of the session. And I think that was from Representative Terry. So I can reach out to her.
Okay. All right, next one, act to authorize general fund bond issue to recapitalize the school revolving renovation fund and give priority to status to certain school facility upgrades. Is there any case to be made that this one needs to be priority?
I don't think so. There's nothing in it that says that schools in certain neighborhoods are going to be upgraded first. And so I have concerns that schools in places like Falmouth will be prioritized.
Yeah, that was the only thing that would have swayed me on that. So that's a no. Does that sound right, Keith?
I agree. I'll check it off as discard.
Okay. Act to authorize general fund bond to issue, invest in smart city technology. I looked into smart city technology. I couldn't find great ways that it was going to benefit our people. Looks like the scores are pretty low. That's a discard.
Yeah. Yep. Good.
Okay. An act to allow reduction on the main care lien. A lot of people had it pretty high, and then a lot of us had it fairly low. I don't have a strong feeling about this one.
I'm not sure I understand this one.
I mean, based on the little research that I did, it looks like ways to collect debt if somebody, oh, somebody's coming in here.
Looks like Rep.
Okay, great. Yeah, this one, when I looked into it, I couldn't find a lot of great information about who is having the liens put on them, essentially. So
yeah.
Representative Farnsworth?
So maybe this is a parking lot one, just because others rated it high, and we aren't.
Okay, let's just.
I know we're putting a lot in the parking lot, but I feel like at some point we'll come back and be like, okay, no, never mind.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I mean, there were definitely some as I scrolled down that had like a ton of fives, and given that we're trying to whittle it down to, Keith, do you know how many we're trying to whittle down to?
They've left it pretty much. Sorry, they've left it up to us, so there's no number, but I mean, at least by half, I think, if not more, would be reasonable.
Okay, that gives us a lot of room to maneuver, so that's good. So the sales tax exemption for menstrual products, I know I put this as a 5.
I did. I had it high.
Yeah. but I can also see how people would,
Yeah.
would rank it fairly low. I feel like we should keep it, but but I don't know. Keith, do you have any thoughts on it?
I don't. I can't remember. I might have done the average because I wasn't. Um, this might be an area where I just have a blind spot. Wasn't sure, so I'm fine with keeping it in.
Okay. I mean, if we're looking at 50%, I think that this fits in the 50%
Yeah.
category. So
Comfortable with that.
okay. An act to protect vulnerable persons from theft. Kristen, do you have any thoughts as to kind of what is the intention of this bill and who are the vulnerable persons that we're talking about here?
I think we're talking about older folks who are. I think this is one of those like scams on elderly folks.
Okay.
But I think that's what it's meant to address. Again, I think it's one of those things that, of course, will affect people and communities of color. I don't know what the disproportionality would be.
I mean, I guess the case that I would make is that I know with new Mainers, a lot of them have been
Yes.
exposed to a lot of scams. Individuals that I've worked with have been taken for, I mean, for quite a bit of money. I don't know if this would address them. Those were more employment scams. So I don't know if we want to push this one forward and say, okay, like, what are we talking about here? Or whether we just take it off the table. Any thoughts? I feel it sounds pretty dubious. I'll say no personally. How do you feel, Kristen?
I'm okay with that.
Keith?
Yeah, me too.
Act to provide main care coverage for dental services to adults with intellectual disabilities, spectrum disorder, brain injuries, other related conditions. Any thoughts on those?
So there were a few bills in the mix that, again, were directed, I think, towards folks with intellectual disabilities, autism, those kinds of things. I don't know enough about how communities of color are affected by those things, and so I don't know whether or not, these were kind of things that would be of real benefit to those communities, or if it was, again, just sort of like this, like a broad reach kind of situation. So I think I ranked them sort of in the 4s, but mostly I think because I had a really hard time because there were so many good bills in here, and then trying to sort of differentiate I found myself feeling like putting it lower on the spectrum because it didn't affect communities of color felt like I wasn't supporting the bill. So I have that kind of like internal conflict going on with a lot of these.
Yeah, I may have rated these as 4 too. But at the same time, it's obviously an important thing, issue, and at the same time, I don't know the data on demographics related to intellectual disabilities.
Right.
If there is a stronger, that's I think why I rated it as 4, because I thought maybe these issues could disproportionately affect those populations, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'd probably be okay with not including this one for now.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. All right. So let's get rid of that one. Act to increase. This is similar. Intensive case managers. So it's interesting that this one got a lot of 4s versus the previous one. Given that I think we're talking about fairly similar populations here. I know I work at B Street Clinic, and across I have St. Mary's Behavioral Health across the hall from me. I take a lot of referrals from them. It's only a handful of individuals who are of color. I think largely because, especially with the new Mainers, they're less likely to seek out diagnoses. So that for me, that brought in some complexity with this. But I also know that case managers can be necessary for people who are struggling with substance and things like that. So with me, I put that as a 4, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I feel like we moved this one forward based on the general numbers. Does anybody have thoughts?
No, I 100% agree with that. I can't remember if this bill addressed the need for case managers in jails.
Yeah.
Um, that would,
Did you say to keep it, Bruce, or?
Yeah, based
Okay.
on just the high number of 4s. Let's see. Election day is a state holiday. I know I put it as a 5. Some people didn't. I don't know. Thoughts?
I mean, I think I had it in the average. Again, I think it's a great bill. And I see I can see the argument for why it would have been ranked higher. I think in comparison to the other things I had on my list, this just didn't rise to that level. But I'm totally good with keeping it in too.
I think I rated it either a 4 or 5 as well, Bruce, just because I thought any way to further enfranchise voters, even if it's a small step, that was kind of my thinking.
So I guess we put this as a keep. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Provide traffic safety education in schools. I don't know. I know it would help a lot of people to get their driver's ed out of the way. That said, a lot of people that I work with couldn't afford cars anyway. I'll be honest.
So this bill also addresses pedestrian and bicycle safety in schools.
Yeah. Well, we did have that.
Is so important in my district. You know, I used to do when I was on the council monthly meetings at the mosque on Bartlett Street with Officer Philippon, and they every month they were concerned about kids, crossing the street, and then when Mears opened the new location right next to the mosque, having kids coming out and people coming down Bartlett Hill, and just students not knowing sort of correct pedestrian and bicycle safety laws. So this one feels really important to me, actually.
I mean, the
Yes,
scores
were totally missed all that. That's good background.
Absolutely. The scores are pretty low. So I think with this one, we might want to parking lot it and see if we can make that case to the rest of the committee. Does that feel right to anybody?
That sounds good to me.
Oh, there he is. Hey, Representative Farnsworth.
Okay. This came before our committee, and we had a long discussion about it. And while we really felt, well, at least I'll put it, I really felt as though it is valuable. Nonetheless, the issue boils down to the ability on the part of the schools to assume that responsibility. And we really felt as though this needed to be something that is done because as the chair of our committee said, if you take a look at history, we keep adding more and more and more to the responsibilities of the schools within the same 5 hours a day. And it becomes an impossibility to do that. And so the point was to encourage that being done outside. Not that it isn't an important thing, it's just that there is a limit as to what the public schools can do in terms of educating.
So I guess that brings us back a little bit, I think, to the questions that we were talking about at the beginning of the meeting, which is how we're looking at these bills. So are we looking at them from the perspective of this would be really valuable legislation to pass for our communities of color, or are we looking at it from the perspective of and making real change, I think, in how we're looking at legislation, or are we looking at it from the perspective of I guess how we've always done things? So I don't know. I guess I'm pushing back a little bit on the committees, but I'm fine with parking lotting, putting it in a parking lot and bringing it to the larger group and seeing how.
We may have to be careful and review the number of parking lot things at the end of the call, just because I don't know, just to get to some outcome. But
I do want to point out, though, that that was basically where the committee came down. That doesn't necessarily mean that that was perfect, but that was where we came down.
So is that, are we going with parking lot on that one?
Yeah,
And
put it in the parking lot. Let's
okay,
think it through.
okay. All right, this one looks like a pass, just looking at it off the bat, an act to increase the minimum grant amount under the main state grant program. A lot of 4s, a lot of 5s. Any reason that we wouldn't put this one forward?
Can you remind me what this one is again?
It's, well, that's another one that came before our committee. And basically, the state grant program is managed by FAME, and it provides a sort of a basic grant to Maine residents, students who are
Okay.
attending post-secondary education.
Okay, so it's direct to students.
And so it's been a set amount. What this is proposing is to basically expand it to allow for covering a larger portion of the cost. It's extremely valuable for, I would say, people from minorities, primarily because it decreases the gap between what what school costs and what a family can afford.
Great.
Yeah. So it really is, I think, very important.
Yep.
Okay, so that one's going forward.
Yep.
The next one looks like a no-go. Authorize general fund bond to support the Gulf of Maine research. This goes back, Representative Farnsworth, we were talking earlier about the fact that a lot of us have a lot of concerns about things in general, but they might not necessarily have to do with minority representation. So I think that this one's probably a no-go.
And I apologize for being late, but I had a hearing or a work session on a bill, and I just got out of that.
No worries at all. All right, so we're pushing that one out. Oh, this one looks like it could be interesting for the same reason that we were talking earlier about the behavioral health workers. Resolve to stabilize behavioral health workforce and avert more expensive treatments. This looks like it's going forward. Any conversation around it? No?
for me,
Okay. An act to provide supplemental appropriations and allocations for the operations of state governments.
I mean,
Go ahead.
so that's the budget. I mean, I feel like we have to support that one.
Yeah, I mean, we can support it, but do we actually push it forward as something that exists within the commission?
I mean, again, it's like such a this for this one to show up, I feel like is just weird. And I don't know. What do you think, Dick?
I agree. I said, this is sort of an operational thing as opposed to a theoretical thing. And I was baffled as to why it was there.
Right.
Yeah, we got to pass a budget. We need to do all these kinds of things. The question is, what is in the budget? And, pardon me.
Yeah, it seems like all of this is going to be, I mean, it just seems like we're doing everything to sift through, which is fine. But I think at least my understanding is our mandate is to kind of focus on certain types of outcomes.
I mean,
well, that is a part of the point, is that
right.
Is the budget going to have a philosophical position in terms of various kinds of programs? That is something that varies from one piece of the budget to the next. So it's really kind of hard to tease it out and say, yes, it will, this won't, and that sort of thing.
So say we moved all the things forward that we're putting as 4s and 5s. then the budget would absolutely have a direct impact on the communities.
Exactly.
So this, I think that if we put this one in the no category, we want to be real clear about, or in the yes category, wherever we put it. I think we just want to, in the notes, make sure that we're saying, you know, well, it's in the no because if we don't pass all of the things that we had as 4 and 5s, then it won't directly impact these communities. If we do, then it absolutely will. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably argue for keeping it then based on what you're saying, because I think Representative Farnsworth, it's a really good point. There might not be an overarching philosophy yet anyway about the overall budget, but we are making a statement about the importance of public investment in our state, and many of that is affecting, you know, new bills obviously, but then existing services and stuff as well. So does that make sense?
Yep. So we're pushing this
So
one
yeah.
forward with that attached to it. Is that
Yeah.
how we're feeling on this right now?
Yeah, I did include a note to the right of this table with the filter decisions, just trying to get at some of these questions that you all just raised.
All right. So this one seems fairly strong, although it did get a couple lows. An act to attract, educate, retain new state residents, and to strengthen workforce. I believe, Kristen, this is yours. Yeah.
It is, yeah. So I'll refrain from commentary, although I would be really interested to hear what the arguments are for the folks that ranked it low, because in my opinion, this is direct impact.
And I would agree. As I recall, we did talk about this we talked about it in the Education Committee, but it isn't related to education. And but our thinking was that this is really an important step forward in terms of trying to pull together not only the new Mainers, but also the minority groups that need to be able to move up the professional ladder.
Can you remind me if this, I totally agree with both of what you're both saying. Does the bill have specific elements that, because one could read this as like, well, we just want more college educated people from other states who look like the way Maine looks now, or some, or you know, at the majority level anyway. And are there, because one of our issues is just not being a welcoming state to other populations.
So this bill names immigrants and refugees, specifically, and speaks to the need for English language acquisition and workforce development and on-the-job training for those folks at specific employers.
Right.
Got it.
So Kristen, my feeling is that probably the low, because I could read it that way as well. If you weren't reading the text and you weren't going into the testimony, that would be why I would have pushed back and said, okay, we're just trying to attract more, you know, Bostonians to move up, kind of. But I agree, given the work that I do on a day-to-day basis, yes, I would say that this is the utmost priority. And Representative Farnsworth, one thing that we did before when we started is we looked at the motivations of each individual that's on this call. And just so you know, I do workforce development in Lewiston. I work a lot with new Mainers. Kristen and I work with very similar people. We work a lot with the same people, actually. And Keith also does that too. So I think that this is front and center for a lot of us.
Well, I think one of the important things that Kristen is trying to do is to replicate in some aspects the program that we have in our adult education program in Portland, which has really proven to be extraordinarily beneficial to this new population. And the vast majority of whom are people of color. And so it really is, I think, a tremendous opportunity. And in fact, we put through on previous occasions, or tried to put through legislation to do this anyway, but it has failed. So I think this is another attempt to finally bring it into reality, which would be fantastic.
I agree.
I mean,
I'm remembering now, Representative Cloutier, I think CEI has worked on this bill too, so it's coming back to me
Yeah.
now.
This was actually a bill that was brought forth by Senator Cates
Right, yeah, yeah,
4 years ago that you guys worked pretty extensively on.
Right.
yeah, yeah.
No, I put this one as high priority for myself, so.
So
I
I'm
don't know.
marking it as a keep.
A keep, and maybe just, if we want to do high priority, if there is a way to make that note, I mean, for me, it definitely is. So. I don't know about everyone else.
I'm making that note here.
Okay, great. All right, this one is very high. An act to clarify the intent of Federal Maine Indian Claim Settlement Act of 1980 to ensure a federal principle of inherent tribal sovereignty. Is this Ben Collins' bill? Am I recalling that accurately?
I'm not sure if it was this one or there's another one on here that is Ben Collins.
Yeah.
Typically, if it's tribal, Ben is the sponsor.
Okay. Well, we kept it. I think that's definitely a keep. That's a 4 and 5. Act to increase the construction debt service limit. There were some highs here. Does anybody want to make a case for why it should go through or why it should not?
We discussed this in committee. I believe this is Representative Brennan's bill. Although there's another bill that was through that came from Senator Millett. But anyhow, the discussion was that the tremendous need for this sort of thing. The question was how we would go about doing it. But I think the need for infrastructure adjustments is absolutely critical. And so, my feeling, I'm sure I rank this very high. And it boils down to making sure that minority kids have the same kind of educational opportunities and environments as kids that are growing up in Falmouth and that sort of thing. So that was basically what it was oriented. Our thinking was on that issue.
So, Dick, can I ask you a quick question? So, I felt compelled in this process to support a lot of the education pieces for all the reasons that you just named.
Yeah.
But my concern is always that when push comes to shove and we're making actual decisions about these things on the local level, because I think the DOE really does push more local control than in a lot of other states, that it would end up being the Falmouths and the Yarmouths that ended up getting this money, and it wouldn't be the lower income school districts. And so is there anything written into the legislation that says that the lower income districts, the districts that need it most, will be considered priority over those that don't?
No, there's not.
Well, we can kind of go either way on this. I'm not sold one way or the other. Keith, do you have any thoughts?
Do you want a parking lot at least for the moment, and we can come back to it at the end of this call, or I'm fine with discarding it for now. If that is an indication that maybe it needs more work along the lines of what you were suggesting, Representative Cloutier, in terms of.
It is an interesting challenge for us and policy-wise to provide direction to the Department of Education to allow for some sort of, when they do their scoring for people that are schools that are maximum eligibility, to be able to include maybe some of our issues, but that becomes a totally different kind of a direction. This basically just appropriates the money to do it.
All right. I'm inclined to say I'm inclined to say no on it. I don't know. I guess we can just go through. We did talk about majority, and unfortunately here we only have 4 people. So I guess I don't know. Kristen, how are you feeling on it? You seem like the swing on this.
I mean, I could go either way. You know, it's just hard because I think that if those provisions were in the bill, then I would feel more comfortable supporting it. Knowing that they aren't, again, those concerns are pretty big for me.
Yeah.
So I would say a no for me.
Okay, then I think that's a no. Ada. Let's see, an act to ensure availability of community integration services. I put that high, but I also didn't fully, wasn't sure exactly what they were going into, and the language of the bill was a little over my head. Does anybody have clarification around this?
Is this Rachel's bill?
We had a lot of Rachel's bills, so I would say probably.
Okay, I'm thinking this is probably either Rachel or Charlotte.
In which case they both tend to work on racial.
Yeah, I would defer to them on the importance of this. I think this is really sort of to help folks get sort of reintegrated into community quicker and with much lower barriers than is currently the case.
And I believe it's focused on individuals that are coming out of incarceration.
Okay.
Yes.
Then, yeah, let's put this one through.
Because that term, community integration, can apply to so many populations.
It can, yeah.
From my perspective, which was working with people with disabilities, that's one of the key issues in the field right now is making sure that people who are living in group homes and that sort of thing are experiencing maximum integration into the community. But I think this was basically focused on the incarcerated population that are coming out. And of course, given the fact that we have a much higher percentage percentage of the population coming out that would be of color, then this really makes a lot of sense.
All right, sounds like that's it going through.
I'm marking that one as keep.
Yeah. All right, act to create a main health care provider loan repayment program. This one is right in the middle with a good amount of high. Any discussion either way?
So again, I don't know how like not having the numbers to know how many folks from communities of color are accessing these programs. It's hard to know whether this would be valuable or not.
And whether or not the policies related to application for the programs is open enough to allow for people of color to get in.
Any thoughts, Keith? I know you work with a lot of, you do a lot of the financial end stuff. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. It's one of those things where it's like, I think it gets very technical, and I guess the question is whether this is, I don't know enough about how this would work, and if it could just get people in more debt, and the intent may be good, but are there like protections in place and those sorts of things? I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah, this does feel like an in the weeds kind of thing, because I'm also thinking, well, if the loan repayment program were in place and it was really helpful to folks, would that encourage more people to go into those professions knowing that they would have less money to repay at the end? So yeah, it's muddy, I think.
I don't feel strong one way or the other. Anybody else?
I wonder if this, I know I was speaking maybe not in favor of so many in the parking lot, but I wonder, given the technical nature of this, and it looks like a lot of highs, at least for the moment, shall we put it in there and try to get some more information?
That looks good. All right, community college Pell Grant match program. That looks like it's going through. Yeah. Any opposition to that?
No, that was one of Brennan's bills, and it really was a very good proposal.
Yeah, I know a lot of the youth that I've worked with tend to really access community college well before anything else. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's see, wood energy investment program. I think as much as many of us would like to, this one didn't seem applicable. So it's like that's a no.
No.
I don't know a ton of people with color with wood stoves. Let's see, an act to rescind and implement the Maine Indian claim settlement. This is interesting that people put it as extremely low, but my guess is that if they're rescinding something, I don't know. Maybe I didn't look deep enough into this. Does anybody have thoughts around it?
Yeah, so this is one of Ben Collings' bills, and I think that this is one of those situations where there were a few bills on the table, and this one was not the one that got chosen to move forward. So this one would go along directly with, I think, is it two? I can't remember what the number is, but it's the Indian Claims Act one. So again, if we're looking at bills on their own merits, this would be one that I would absolutely move forward. But if we're looking at it in the context of the other bills that are on the table that are also moving right now, then this one would come off and that other one would remain.
So the issue becomes, in order to implement new legislation, you have to rescind this, and so it becomes a case of how do you put those pieces together?
So then I
Probably.
say we have to move this forward.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Okay, so moving that one forward. The next one, an act to reduce landfilling of municipal solid waste. That looks like a no.
Yeah.
Looks like this one's a no. An act to increase maximum pension deduction for state income tax. All right. So we're on to 27, an act to establish a fund to compensate unjustly incarcerated persons. This one looks like a go.
Definitely.
Just tearing through a couple of these so that we can see if we can get through some before the end here. This one looks like a no-go. Act to give the Commissioner of Fisheries. I think we had discussed this before.
I do have to say that I laughed really, really hard in reading that bill. I mean, there were so many weird things in there.
Yeah, that one was that. I had the same response. It's like, yes, this is great, but is it really in our purview? And I don't think it is. So, all right, this is interesting. An act to authorize tribal gaming. We had a lot of lows and a lot of highs. Does anybody have thoughts as to how it got as many extremely lows?
I have no idea. This goes directly to tribal sovereignty for me.
Yeah, same here.
So, I mean, it has enough extremely high that I feel like we can put it through. Anybody opposed?
No, so. I would be interested though in hearing what the thoughts are from the folks that ranked it extremely low. So maybe when we convene again, if folks are on, we could ask that question.
I wonder, the only thing I could think of, Representative Cloutier, is I wonder if people felt like with, is it 2094 and then the one we just discussed, if those go through, this would be a moot question, wouldn't it? Because the tribes that includes their ability to do gaming. That's the only thing I could think of as a logic path there. But.
All right, so we move it forward, and maybe just if we do reconvene, we're like, we may just because we're curious.
Ask the question about who ranked it low and why.
Yeah. I mean, I can see some people might feel like it could lead to, I don't know, gambling issues among. I don't know. That's the only thing that I can think of on pushback. But all right, so this one looks like a no. An act regarding penalties for early retirement of certain members of Maine Public Employees Retirement System. That's a no. An act to allow deductions from prison sentences. That looks like it's going through for rehabilitative activities. I'm a huge advocate of that, and it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of opposition. This one has a little bit more mixed reviews. An act to provide healthcare preceptor tax credit. Anybody have thoughts on that one?
It's similar, I think, to the
the earlier one.
loan program that we talked about earlier, I'm fine with putting it in the no pile.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. So this one looks like a no. This one looks like a no. An act to authorize general fund bond to establish Maine County Correctional Facilities Revolving Construction Improvement Fund.
So can I ask you a question about this actually? Because I didn't struggle with this. Like I ranked it low, but it's
I
a
struggled
question.
with it.
What?
I struggled with it. So
I just so I served on our county budget committee too, and Androscoggin County Jail is literally falling apart, like falling apart. And I understand and I agree that we absolutely don't. We want to try to avoid incarceration for folks at what as much as we possibly can. But there are folks who are going to be incarcerated. Like that's just kind of factual. And shouldn't we be providing the best accommodations for them as we can if they're going to be there? I mean, like, I just think about our county budget committee and it's so awful. Like our county commission is so awful. They're running the jail. Like, I don't even think incarcerated folks there are like get coffee in the morning. Like it's that bad. And so I really struggle with us saying, we're not going to fund capital projects for jails when we know that there are people that have to live in those.
And that the higher percentage of people of color are living in that environment.
no, that's a real issue. And honestly, I think that probably most of us, like, I'll be honest, yeah, those of you who know me know that I'm kind of pushing against all of it. I think we want to drain. I think we want to suffocate the prison system a little bit.
Okay.
But I totally agree. I had the same reservations. I'm like, like I was saying, Representative Farnsworth, I spent a good time of my life in that, 3.5 years of my life in that system. Yeah, having bad accommodations is really detrimental. So I had the same internal struggle.
I wonder if I didn't give full consideration, Representative Cloutier, to that point, which is a good one. I wonder if we're going to discard this one, at least noting this might be one of those cases where like it's too general. I mean, it's very specific in some ways, but to get at some of the issues I think Bruce has raised, make sure that's clear in the legislation. I don't know how to do that. One would do that, but I can make that note here.
Yeah, I think including this conversation in the notes would be helpful. Because I do, I think that if I'm questioning it and Bruce is questioning it, I feel like that's something that probably a lot of people are thinking about.
All right, so it's a no with caveats, it sounds like.
I would agree.
All right, this one is all over the board. An act to enhance, improve Maine Developmental Services Oversight Advisory Board to establish the Aging Disability Mortality Review Panel. My guess is that this went over a lot of our heads. At least it kind of went over mine.
Well, I can fill you in since that's
please,
my
yes.
field.
Oh, excellent.
This basically grew out of the old Pineland consent decree and was required to, once we closed the consent decree, they had to set up a new oversight committee to basically take a look at the care that's being provided with the new community-based system. Recently, in fact, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, the US DHHS came up with a very, very critical report on the oversight of the department under adult protective of monitoring these serious hospitalizations or injuries and deaths of people with disabilities. And this committee was supposed to be charged with taking a look at that. Now, admittedly, it's not a group that is necessarily of color, but it is a significant minority in terms of being disabled. So that's what this was supposed to do, was basically to set up a review panel that had some teeth in it to really take a look at what's happening in terms of the management of this particular population. That's more than you ever wanted to know, I'm sure.
No, that's excellent. I mean, I guess, and it kind of goes back to the question that we had earlier, which is what is the mandate of this particular commission? And, I don't know, for me, in terms of what I view the mandate to be, I'd say it's low. In terms of the desire to see it move forward, it sounds like it would be good to move forward, but it would be weird for this commission to be driving it. Does that sound right?
Yeah, well, that's why I say it really becomes a civil rights kind of an issue.
Okay.
Whether it's people of color or not, it still is a civil rights issue in terms of the care of people that are in the appropriate care for people that are in the custody or in the overall care of the state.
Okay. I don't know. Is there any thought as to why we would say yes on it, other than this? I mean, the civil rights thing is big, but this might just be a vote kind of thing. I don't know. Representative Farnsworth, sounds like a yes for you.
Well, it was a yes for me. I will be very clear about that.
Okay. Kristen, or sorry, Representative Cloutier. Someday I'll get used to calling you by your title.
Call me Kristen. I really prefer that, actually.
Okay.
So I guess I'm having a hard time making the connection to the purview of this committee. So it would be a no for me.
Keith, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. I understanding this is one of those things that I think is totally important, but I think just given the focus of the commission, I would vote no on it.
Yeah, I tend to lean that way too, even though I would really like to see it happen. I'm gonna lean no. So, but I hear you. I totally hear you, Rep.
Hey, Bruce, I'm just gonna do a time check because we had booked until noon. I could probably go a little bit longer, but we have 30 more bills to go through, it looks like. So.
Should we just go fast, yes, no on this, or should we try to meet again? What makes the most sense to people?
I mean, let's try to get through it. I can be here as long as I need to be.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay, and I can as well. All right, so an act to address main shortage of behavioral health services for minors. I know I have a lot of people who I work with who have those issues. Looks pretty high. Looks like a yes. Yeah.
I would say it. In fact, I'm surprised it isn't a number 5 in many cases. I'm not sure why I didn't score as a number 5.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, so that's a yes. Act to protect taxpayers and privatization of state services. I think I went high on this one, but this one looks like it's not going to go through based on the general numbers unless we want to make a hard case.
The only thing I'll note is my own reading on it was like, I don't feel like we should be privatizing state services personally, but if we are, then I do want to obviously protect taxpayers, but I don't know, Representatives Book, Whittier, Farnsworth, do you have any insight on that? Am I being too parochial on that?
No, I agree. I think that I wouldn't move this one forward.
Okay. Yeah, outside of the purview was kind of where I went with that. Yeah. All right. Act to create and sustain jobs, encourage affordable housing through development of co-ops. I'm a huge co-op advocate.
Me too.
Yes, I'm big on it. But there is some distribution around that. It looks strong enough that we can move it forward. But it also isn't.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Representative Farnsworth?
Well, whenever you're talking about this sort of thing, you're talking about housing and making sure that we have more housing available for people who don't have the money to afford housing, to be quite honest. We need to do a lot more of that. And that involves people of color in many cases.
Yeah.
And this,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, this just affords the ability for ownership in ways that other things don't. And so that I feel like is really, really important.
Yeah, that is very important.
I agree.
And Lewiston has a lot of great examples of it. So yeah, that one's going through. Act to improve freedom of access laws in Maine. This one is all over the board. Any thoughts, feelings around this one?
I mean, I agree with the premise. I'm not sure it fits the purview.
Right.
Okay. Keith,
Exactly.
thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, it looks like a no then, even though it has a lot of extremely high, it's pretty well distributed. Universal healthcare, looks like that's a go through.
Yay.
Yay, exactly. Act to strengthen consumer protections in healthcare. This one's pretty strong. I think this one goes through.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah,
reason
I
it wouldn't?
agree.
Yeah. An act to enhance enforcement of employment laws. This looks like a yes.
Yeah.
Act to allow confinement of female prisoners. This is the same. Yeah. I had Chris and I had the exact same thoughts. However, I did have that same internal struggle that we had talked about before. But yeah, that looks like a no-go. We don't have to go too deep into it because it'll take a lot of time. Fish and wildlife enforcement laws, as great as it might be, not the purview. Act relating to computation of benefits for correctional officers. Yeah, Keith and I talked about this yesterday. Looks like a no. An act regarding the adoption of education policies by school boards. I know this was a 3 for me. This looks like a no, but it's enough in the middle that there could be a case made. Anybody want to make that case, or is it worth me?
It was something that we discussed in committee, and basically it was trying to differentiate the roles of school boards and defining it in relationship to the state. And it became very complex, but basically I think that it really doesn't necessarily apply to the purview of our mandate.
Okay, so that's a no. An act to incentivize the purchase of electric public school buses. Sounds like a good effort, but doesn't look like it has the support.
I would agree. That's
Outside the
another
purview.
one we had handled in committee.
An act to provide sales tax exemption for textbooks. Looks high enough. I'd say it goes through. I know that it does impact a lot of people that I work with.
Yep, especially those attending
Yeah.
community colleges, I think.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think I rated that one highlight too.
Okay. Act to promote outdoor recreational activities for Maine students, all over the place, but looks like mostly no's. So any reason to make a case for it? Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Act to protect drinking water for low-income Maine residents. That looks like a yes.
I think that's very high.
That's environmental justice, it looks like. Resolve to establish a commission to increase housing opportunities in Maine by studying zoning and land use restrictions. This looks like it's also environmental justice. Looks like a go through, yeah?
So it's environmental justice. It's also,
Zoning and
yeah, we had an instance on the Lewiston City Council where there was a proposal to basically institute a policy that would have resulted in redlining.
Yeah,
This would have prevented that. So this is really important.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
I agree.
Okay, great. All right, moving through. Resolve authorizing the establishment of prosecutorial districts. This one's interesting. I didn't fully understand it. I think I might have gone high on it, and I did have some discussion around it, but I also, it looks like a no.
So I do want to point out, though, that when I went in and I did my work on this, I read the bill. I also went in and looked at who provided testimony. And there was testimony provided on behalf of one of the tribes saying that this would have been really, really important to them and their ability and their prosecutorial district. So if before we, I think, discard this one, I think that this requires a conversation, even though the numbers are low, because my guess is that folks did not look at that testimony and didn't get the sense of urgency around that based upon the bill's text.
Yes, Kristen, I qualify.
Okay, so let's put that parking lot with discussion needed. Does that work?
Okay.
Act to eliminate waiting lists for home community-based services for adults with intellectual disabilities. This one, I mean, it's got a lot of distribution, and then it has quite a few in the 4. Kind of, I think what we talked about earlier, the fact that a lot of people of color don't get the diagnoses, therefore not necessarily served.
Right.
But I don't know. Is there, Representative Farnsworth, this seems like it's really your expertise. Do you have
Well,
thoughts?
yeah, basically, this is something we've been trying to deal with. If you're talking about, once again, it's the tail end of the what was originally the Pineland consent decree, then became the community consent decree, basically saying that people who would have qualified for eligibility to enter Pineland should be receiving the same quality services as the people that were actually coming out of Pineland. And but we're saying that we haven't begun to meet the demand because there's the waiting lists keep growing and growing and growing. So and that in regards not just people with intellectual disabilities, it also includes that particular population, whether they be Native American or whether they be people of color and that sort of thing. It basically is a broader kind of picture. So I think that's where it gets a little blurred because it does paint a broad picture.
Would anyone feel weird about putting this one forward? It has enough highs, but it also has a lot of lows.
Obviously, I wouldn't feel weird about that, no.
Can we, so I think that we put the other one that was related to intellectual disabilities in the parking lot. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah. Does this one feel more or less relevant than the previous one?
I mean, I'm just wondering if we should, when we dial back to the parking lot at the end, we should consider them all together.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Keith, any thoughts on it?
I'd be willing to go along with that.
Keith, you're muted. Sorry.
I'm fine with that, but can you repeat what you said, Chris? I want to just get that in the notes here on this.
I was just wondering if, well, I was wondering where we had put the last one that we looked at that was related to intellectual disabilities, and I think it was in the parking lot.
Yeah,
And
I was trying to find that.
I was just wondering if we should consider them all together at the end of this call when we go back to the parking lot.
I mean, what are we doing with the parking lot stuff? Are we bringing it forth to the, are we putting it in an email, or are we meeting again, or are we bringing it to the general committee?
So I guess I was thinking we would look at it when we were done going through the rest of these and figuring out, because some of them I think we will probably discard. Some we may decide to move forward, and then others we might want to have a bigger discussion about.
Right.
Okay. All right. So with that caveat, let's see, an act to amend waste motor oil disposal sites. As that might sound, doesn't seem like it's within our purview. An act to promote renewable energy resources also sounds good, but not purview. So, act concerning name changes for minors. There's a lot of variation here. I have some thoughts as to why that might be, but I don't have strong thoughts on the bill. Anybody with thoughts around it?
Not I.
But it looks like enough no's to say no.
I would agree.
An act to amend laws concerning retired community municipal law enforcement officers and health insurance program. That looks no.
Right.
An act to authorize the automatic continuation of absentee voter status until determination of that status. This one's all over the map with strong feelings in both directions. Anybody want to make
For
a
me,
case?
this again goes to creating as few barriers as possible to voting.
Right.
That was my gut reaction too.
That was mine too. I may have put it low because of the purview, but it seems like it's strong enough that I think that goes forward. Fair Chance Employment Act looks like it should be priority. So maybe we even star that one as high priority. Which is weird. I actually provided testimony around the ban the box, if that's what they're talking about. However, I've also seen studies to say that ban the box actually hurts people, but that we'll go much deeper in the long term on that one. An act to amend provisions of the Maine Medical Use of Marijuana Act. Does anybody really understand the provisions around that they're talking about?
So for this one for me was, I think I ranked it low because of the, because it narrowed it to medical use.
Oh.
I felt like if it were a more broad bill, I would have ranked it higher. It basically, I think, is a lot of code related language.
Okay.
So discard.
It looks like a discard. I mean, the split is so even that it just doesn't look like it's going to be a strong push either way. Act to lower healthcare costs. That one's extremely high by and large at 57.14%. So that's a yes.
So just going back to the universal healthcare one, can we make that one a priority? Because that one was really high too, I think.
Yep, that one was.
Do you remember the bill number? I'm just trying to find it.
I don't.
We can scroll back. We're actually almost done. We're doing pretty good, so we'll be in the parking lot in a minute. And if we want to just make sure that we highlight that one when we go back through. I feel like that one was like 20 in or something like that.
Yeah. I can't find it right now, but we can do it after. Let's keep going.
Resolve to establish task force to study the coordination of services and expansion of educational programs for young adults with disabilities. This one looks high enough that we could push it through.
Yeah, I can give you some background on that. Basically, it is basically for people with disabilities, but it is to, regardless of color, to basically involve adult education to provide educational opportunities so that adults can be get involved in the workforce, either partially or fully, or to develop their skills in artistic efforts to become independent entrepreneurs.
Wow. Okay. That sounds good to me. I don't know. Looks like a yes.
So one thing I want to add to that too is that the difference between this one and I think the other ones we've talked about in terms of disabilities is that this one creates a task force, which allows us to actually look at the process that's created. And so we can make that process more equitable than, do you know what I mean? So I think that that's an important difference between this and the others.
Great. Okay. So that looks like a yes. An act to correct errors, inconsistencies, and conflicts and revise state liquor laws. That one's pretty low. So I'd say that's a no. I'm not sure discussion is needed. An act to increase government accountability. This one is all over the place. Definitely has some high ranks. I guess it's about the interpretation of what that accountability would look like. Does anybody have insight into that?
I can't really remember what the details of this one
same here.
are.
That was Chinette's bill, wasn't it?
Which one?
I think it was Chinette's bill.
Oh. Yeah.
What's that? Oh, Kristen, I'm gonna based on that.
It wasn't.
No, I just want to, whatever your gut reaction is, it's probably right here. So
no, it was an oh yeah, that's right. It probably was Justin's because he does a lot around government accountability and those kinds of things.
Do you have any thoughts on it?
I don't really. I think I could see both how it is related to purview and how it might not be. Okay. So yeah, no real gut feeling about it.
It's not really overwhelming. I don't see it making it through the final stage, but it also has a lot of high and extremely high. What do you guys want to do with it?
Let's let it go through and open up discussion.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that as a yes. All right, we're almost to the end here. And this looks like a no, an act to implement recommendations of the Board of Dental Practice related to the definitions of supervision and teledentistry. I think I put it at a 4, but I also don't think so.
Open wide.
Yeah, exactly. Open wide and wide open. Resolve requiring the Department of Education to report on issues relating to bullying in schools. This one looks pretty high.
It is. It was very important, and it's a lot of this has resulted in the Department of Education establishing a internal component that basically is looking at safety in the schools, and they're going to be addressing bullying, and they're doing a lot of work out in the community. So this is really very closely related to that.
Okay, it looks like it'll go through anyway. It has the numbers. So that's kind of where we're at. So Keith, you're on. What do you want to take us to the parking lot?
Yeah, so let me see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parking lot. That's not too bad.
That's not bad at all.
So the first one was LD 71. So the second bill we looked at was an act to reinstate the income tax deduction for contributions to college savings accounts. Representative Farnsworth, I don't think you were on yet when we
I wasn't on, no.
discussed that one.
Dick, just to sort of fill you in, I'm on taxation, and this came before taxation. And the argument that was made, I think mostly by Representative Tipping, having done the research, extremely good at, was that the 529 savings plans aren't actually the most effective means to get student loan and college education funding relief to folks. So
Well,
I'd be okay with leaving this one off.
Yeah, the 529s basically are designed to allow for people to develop a sort of a trust fund that would be used for educational purposes. And the only people that can afford to do that are people with some money. So it really doesn't have a positive impact for people of poverty or minorities.
All right.
So
Sounds like
moving this one to discard.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Okay.
What's the next one, Keith?
The next one is the following bill, LD 104, an act to replace the earned income tax credit with the main work credit.
So Dick, you might be able to help us with this. So we were talking about, so there were a couple EITC bills on the table this session, and I think mostly the first half of the session. So do you remember, I think that we passed Mo Terry's bill, which was an expansion of the EITC.
Right.
I think this was Senator Vitelli's sort of version of that same bill. So the question we had was whether we move this one forward knowing that the other one had been passed, or if we take it off knowing that the other one had been passed. Are we considering bills sort of
Regardless of previous.
Yeah.
My feeling is that if we've gotten the other one passed, this one probably would have, unless it provided significantly different additions to the previous bill, it probably wouldn't have a ghost of a chance.
So one thing that I'm trying to remember is if Representative Terry's bill was made into a task force as opposed to actual legislation. And in that case, I think I would make the argument to move this one forward because this is actual legislation versus a task force to look at legislation.
So does that mean
I don't remember.
Are we going no on this, or because it's already been passed? I know that was kind of the big issue. Or are we saying that we want to symbolically hold on to it to say this is a priority for us?
I mean, could we hold on to it and have it part of a larger conversation with the larger committee?
I think we can do that.
Okay.
We'll put this as keep, and then, but for further discussion.
Yeah, because determining how it relates to Terry's bill, I think really would be a very critical piece.
Okay. So the next
That-
one,
I can talk to Eloise about it, because I was supposed to talk to her about it and I just never closed the loops. Maybe I can get a little more information.
the next one, Bruce, was LD 194, an act to allow the reduction of a main care lien.
What number was that for page?
LD 194. Oh,
No.
Sorry, yeah, hold on. 1, 2, 3.
Right here, it looks
6.
like 6.
So Dick, do you know, were you on the call for this one? I don't know enough about this.
No,
I think, I don't know. I guess I'm caught here because I don't feel like I understand it enough. And if I had my druthers, I think I would take it off. But there are a lot of folks who ranked it really high.
I think we could discard it, and then if others want to challenge that,
I
we
would
can.
need to dig into it a little bit deeper in order to figure out exactly what. I remember reading through the legislation and trying to, because it was fairly complex. It wasn't a nice, simple thing that if a person had developed a huge debt, so to speak, and there was a lien against their property in order to pay back main care. I mean, it became very complex. So I would need to dig into it a lot more before I just say one way or the other.
So maybe this one goes on that list of leaving it on and having bigger conversation.
More extensive conversation, and have some of us do a little research, go back into it.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one, Bruce, was LD 470. I think it's page 12. An act to provide traffic safety education in schools.
I mean, it looks like this is a no based on the overall rankings. I don't know.
So I would really like to leave it on.
And I respect that, Kristen.
This is one of those ones that for my district, it really is important. And I wonder if folks dug in enough, folks not on the committee and folks who aren't necessarily familiar with this bill, dug in enough to know that it included things other than cars, that it was really based upon pedestrian and bicycle.
Oh, well, it was Maddie's bill,
Right.
And she'd been hit by a car, and when she was on the bicycle, so that's the reason that she put it in.
Oh yeah, I forgot
So
about
maybe this is one that is, further discussion. I think if we brought it to the full committee and folks, wanted to take it off, I'd be comfortable with that. But I do feel like it's a conversation worth having.
Yeah.
that. I don't have an issue with keeping it. It does have enough highs that I think we can make the case. And then we just try to get the whole committee. You guys want to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
So the next one was, I think it's page 21, Bruce, LD 799, an act to create the main healthcare provider loan repayment program.
So I think I'm okay with taking that one off.
Okay.
Although, yeah, again, it's got a lot of highs on there, and I'd be interested in. I guess I'm caught between feeling like having a program like that might encourage folks to go into those professions, but then I'm also caught with feeling like, are folks, will it be enough incentive?
Well, also the issue basically boils down to getting people the education so they can become a provider in the first place, and that I think is the critical piece for our minority groups at this particular point.
Yeah, this might be a bit of putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So do we want to say no on this one because of that?
I
Sounds
would.
like that, yeah.
What do you mean?
So the next one, Bruce, having trouble tracking the page number here, but it's LD 1967. It's the one about the prosecutorial districts in Down East Maine.
So that one I think we need to leave on for larger discussion. Because again, I don't think that folks may not have looked at the testimony.
Okay.
And it has a direct link to a tribal issue.
Yeah, I could lean that way and say yes.
Watching.
So yeah, so let's say yes on that.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then the next one is the one immediately after that. It's about it's LD 1984 about waiting lists.
I found the universal healthcare one.
Oh yeah, what is that? What's the number?
That's 1611. That is number
Okay.
39 on the list.
Bruce, is that a princess next to you?
Oh, it's I'm not a princess.
Oh, okay, good. I was hoping that was the answer.
You want to read that book? Go read with me. All right. So sorry, I cut you off because I was excited that I found the universal one. Which was the one that Keith that you just dropped off?
1984. It's the one immediately after the Down East one. It's about eliminate waiting lists for home and community-based services for adults with intellectual disabilities, etc.
Thoughts? There it is. I mean, the distribution is pretty even across the board with no extremely highs. Although I know that there is a strong case to be made for it. Is there enough of a case to say that the commission should be pushing it?
So again, I think this is the one that we had talked about considering with the other intellectual
Yeah.
abilities bill that we talked about earlier on. I guess I don't see enough of a link. I think that it is important legislation. I don't see enough of a link to our purview to move it forward, I guess.
The
But Dick, I
question
think
would be,
Yeah.
if we did that, would it improve the possibility for people from minority groups to get the necessary services that they need?
Yeah, and that's a good point, to get the diagnoses.
Yeah.
So why don't we move it forward and see if there's broader discussion around it.
I'm game.
Okay. I don't
And
have super strong feelings around it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And how many did we put through? You know, Keith, or about like
I'm
how?
counting them now.
Okay.
This is kind of funny. I think we have 32 discards and 33 keep.
That's what we were hoping for. So
That was the last parking lot one that we just did.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh wait, hold on. Maybe I don't have that one in there. What was that number again, Bruce? I'm sorry.
for the last one, it was 1984.
Yeah. Okay.
Number
Sorry, bear
52.
with me for a second here, and let me try that again because I think I didn't have that in there. Okay. Yeah, so 33 keep and 32 discard.
I feel pretty good about that. What is the next step here that we have? When is the next meeting that we're all like on? Is that the Friday one, or is that next week?
Well, the one on the calendar anyway says the next full committee meeting is next Wednesday, the 22nd. I'll request, so people are supposed to look at what we put forward by Friday and let us know if they want us to reconsider any of the bills. One thing I'm not sure of is how we finalize the assessment of these 33. I mean, that's a lot of work. And I suppose we could see if the committee's willing to split it up where you'll recall, like there's that 1-page assessment form that I think we're supposed to complete one of those for each of the bills.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Are we sure that there's supposed to be that many of these? Like, I mean, I know we whittled it down to 50%, but I almost feel like
They left it up to us, but that's the yeah. I mean, they left it up to us. And if we want to, we can try to whittle it down even further. But they left it totally up to the subcommittees.
Ugh, well, thoughts? I don't know.
Yeah, what do folks think?
Should we?
So I'm looking at this calendar, and I actually don't see any other subcommittee meetings. I don't know if that's because
Exactly. No, I agree.
you guys are supposed to plan them, or if it's because we're not supposed to meet again as a subcommittee. I mean, honestly, filling out one of those forms for 33 of these bills is
A lot.
a
Yeah.
lot, and I don't know. I feel like, you know, hashing that out in a Zoom call might be easier and more effective with the full committee. I don't know, maybe not because there's so many of us.
Yeah, so let me read you what Rachel sent to us. I guess it was yesterday, Bruce. I think you were on this too. We ask that by having a meeting or some other form of filtering conversation over email or elsewhere, you submit your subcommittee's recommendations to Reggie, Katie, and Megan by the end of the day, Wednesday, July 15th. So that's what we're doing now. They will then share each subcommittee selections with the full committee. Any member of the full committee can then contact the subcommittee co-chair and request a bill be reconsidered. Working with their subcommittees, co-chairs will decide on which bills to reconsider prior to the weekend. We then recommend you have another meeting or conversation before the next full committee meeting on July 22nd to decide on your final recommendations. You can review these items in more detail in the process document, which is now this link. So maybe it is just finalizing this list and any reconsiderations. Does that sound right to you guys based on what I just read?
Yeah, I think it sounds, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think it sounds to me like, and looking what you just said in combination with the calendar, that we're coming together as a full committee again on Friday, and that
Wednesday, the 22nd, I think.
except that on this calendar it has a full committee vote on reconsidered bills list for the 17th. So yeah, I don't know.
I guess, Bruce, let's follow up with Rachel and others and see what.
Yeah,
I think there's some confusion. I know I'm confused now too.
yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out from there, I guess. Okay.
But we at least have a good start on this. I mean, getting it down by half, I think is good. So, Bruce, if you'd like, I'll just respond to that email to the entire commission because I'm sure others might have questions too. And we'll try to get answers here today.
That'd be great.
But this would be our list going forward today anyway, and we'll figure out our next steps afterwards.
Okay, great. Was there anything else that we should cover today before we adjourn, or?
I think that's about it.
Yeah, thanks for chairing this, Bruce. And thank you, Representative Farnsworth and Cloutier. This has been really illuminating to me.
Yeah, thank you too for leading the process.
Yes.
You guys for putting up with us. All right.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, you
Likewise.
too. Bye.
And
Bye
keep
now.
well.
You too.